Hello and welcome back to Explainiacs. I'm Lindley, Gooden, reformed journalist and curious human. Now this time we're leaping into a completely new subject, still with a foot in the world of business. This time we're asking the question, can a company, any company, be helpful enough, friendly enough, genuine enough to make us fall in love with them?
Love is being excited to see someone.
Love is when you find something that makes you happy no matter what.
Well, I'm in this line of work and I know only one other person who's as fanatical as I am about this question, possibly even more, and she is the fantastic Gina Balarin. Gina, hello.
Hello, Lindley. It is a pleasure to be here again with you. It's been 6 years since we last had a conversation that was recorded.
It's true, and that was the first and the last time we met face-to-face. Where are you?
I'm all the way down under in Australia. But that doesn't matter because in this global world, people can connect anywhere doing anything. And isn't that kind of the point of what we're going to be discussing?
That's like a segue. Have you done this before?
Maybe.
Explainiacs Biography.
Okay, well, let's tell the world who you are, not just where you are. Gina Balarin is a world-renowned communicator. Now, she's an inspirational TEDx speaker, she's a storyteller, a B2B marketing guru, and sure, she's a member of the Professional Speaking Association. Of course, a chartered marketer. She has a master's in management communications, and she's also an author. If you haven't already read her book, The Secret Army, Leadership, Marketing, and the Power of People, you may well want to take a little look after the next 15 minutes or so. But even more than that, she's absolutely committed to the concept of authenticity when you're dealing with the people who pay your bills, your customers. So, Gina, hey, we live in a lovely modern world of communication, so many options, so little time. But are we getting it right? What's going wrong, do you think, at the moment?
You know, Lindley, thinking about this, I actually think that we're getting it less wrong than we ever have in the past.
Wow.
And that's because of COVID.
Okay.
Now, you've heard the fact that in the midst of crisis lies opportunity. Well, the fact is that when times are tough, people have to reach out to other human beings, especially if you can't touch each other, right?
Yeah.
So what businesses are doing instead is they're having to focus on alternative ways of communicating with their staff and with their customers. And this means that they have to not just communicate, share lots of messages and hope that someone gets those messages. They have to be able to connect with people.
Yeah.
Now, are they all doing it right? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I have received dozens of emails from brands that I haven't heard from in 5-10 years, and they're going, we're doing the right thing. We're looking after you. Here's our COVID list of resources. I'm like, where were you?
Issues. Please describe.
Early on, during this crisis, people were very stressed because they had to reach out and spend more time, take more effort in communicating with their colleagues and the people around them. But it has changed the way we communicate. We had to, on a personal level, really reach out, spend more time, and not have that huge infrastructure to hide behind. That was a big deal, I think, and we're still feeling it now.
You've got two really good points there. The first is about the infrastructure and how infrastructure enables communications. And the second thing is it's a level playing field. Well, you know, we're going to make the assumption that it's a level playing field because we both have access to the internet. We both have access to computers.
Very good point.
You know, it's not a level playing field for everyone. But when talking about people in the business world, what is very interesting about the face-to-face format is there's actually a little bit of science, of biology of human connections and how close you are to each other. It's called proxemics.
Okay.
You can have lots of different levels of distance and different levels of community and connection.
Right.
The most powerful between strangers and the most comfortable between strangers is what he terms like the 4 feet distance.
Okay.
What is intriguing is because of how far I am away from my laptop, because of how far you are away from your laptop, we sit almost at 4 feet. Which means when you have the visual cues, you have the auditory cues, and you actually can see and interact with people's body language in 4 feet, it's as if you were having, not quite, but close enough, a real life conversation. Yeah. If you're able to provide the support, the advice, the engagement, the encouragement to people during this time when they need it more than anything else. And you're able to do so in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're selling to them, and it doesn't make them feel like this is a little bit cringy or self-fulfilling or just arrogant. that will stand them in good stead for relationships moving forward.
Explainiacs. Lessons to learn.
What do we need to learn? I think you and I both have our theories and practical experience of why this is important. What we're learning right now is important. The personal connection, the importance of reaching out to people who perhaps you don't normally. This is true not only on a personal scale, one-to-one, but it's also true with companies.
Absolutely. The strength of a relationship that someone creates with you during crisis is going to reflect how they will see you in the future. I did an article recently where I was interviewing a bunch of restaurateurs. You know, they've gone through absolute chaos in these crises. But what was fascinating is one of the groups that I spoke to who have a restaurant that serves breakfast pivoted almost instantly to be able to provide takeaways. They went from getting to 25% of their turnover with the shutdown immediately back to 100% of their turnover over the weeks to come. Why? Because they had built an emotional and a personal connection with the members of their community who were part of their restaurant. It's a measure of a person as to how you treat other human beings when the chips are down.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can smell an ulterior motive a mile off.
What do you love?
You've already started us off, but let's try to work out step by step how you can help somebody because they choose to fall in love with you, to wish that they could spend more time with you, possibly to even buy from you. That's not normally true in a personal relationship, but possibly it is. We won't go into that right now.
We are all difficult. We all come to each new relationship wanting easy. But we also come with our fair share of unresolved, painful experiences from previous relationships.
Let's talk about a love. Let's go from the back to the front. We have to define what it feels like. What is it that you and I feel about a company when we really love them?
Well, actually, there's a lot of science behind the chemicals that create love. And there is a fascinating review of this from Harvard that talks about the different chemicals that are involved. When we have lust, we talk about testosterone and estrogen being released. When we're attracted to something, we release the ones that are normally associated with happiness, like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And then over the long period, there are different hormones, oxytocin, which is also associated with happiness. And there's a fascinating one called vasopressin. Now, what happens is that in a relationship over time, you know, you have this like, wow, love affair. It's amazing. And we're all just gaga and doolally with the hormones that are coursing through our bodies.
Other words are available. I'm not.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah. Gaga, doolally, crazy about. And over time, that fades. And what replaces in a normal, healthy relationship is vasopressin, which is actually about how people stick together, they stick with each other. It's linked to behavior that produces long-term relationships. Right. So can brands do this too?
Thinking creatively.
Let's compare notes for a second. Let's talk dating, because you meet somebody, you size them up, and you think, okay, I'll go to date 2 possibly if they call me. Then they call me. So let's go out on a second date. Second date, lots of misconstruing. You know, you're trying to get to know each other and maybe not everything kind of slots into place, but you're willing to accept it. What do we do now? What's next, Gina?
Well, once you've got to know someone, you have to then get over the hurdles of, I'm not sure if this all adds up.
Yeah.
And delve deep to find, is there a different, more advanced level of connection? In the sales journey, you'll go, all right, I like brand A and brand B. Now, this is possibly different to the dating analogy, unless you are actually doing lots of dates with lots of people and you're trying to choose between them, because that's what happens in a buying cycle. You know, you're effectively dating everyone.
Yeah.
So it can be as simple as you have a really strong brand color that people just don't like.
Yeah. And there will be apologies. There will be moments when you got lines crossed completely. You're getting to the point where familiarity, but more than that, familiarity and love take over. And these are lovely things. And actually then you feel you are, not only are you part of that unit, but the unit defines you.
That is beautiful. And that's such a lovely marketing analogy, because if you find that the unit defines you, what happens is that the customer almost volunteers their desire to be seen as an extended member of the brand family.
Explainiacs. Routes to success.
people are using data and they are, looking at KPIs, key performance indicators. They are going out and listening to their customers. But actually, sometimes the best question to ask yourself as a company is the brutal one. Who really hated it? And can you have a chat with them about that? That would be really useful and actually quite refreshing sometimes to just shake and see what happens.
It's true. I think asking your customers for what they don't like can give you a lot of answers, especially to things that you hadn't thought to improve.
Yeah.
It's a really useful tool. Another really important thing to ask your customers is, what are the moments of passion? We talk about brands and the emotional attachment that people have to brands. Now, a few years ago, there was a perception that people actually didn't feel as strongly emotionally connected to B2B brands. And then research came out from the CEB. What was fascinating is that they actually found that customers who were more emotionally connected with the brands were those who had a higher perceived risk associated with buying that brand.
So the more investment, the more that could go wrong, and the more they delight you, the better your relationship.
Yes. They looked at Cisco, Oracle, Accenture, and PwC as really, really at the top. And when you think about how much you're going to spend with those brands, it's a lot of money. And logically, what ended up happening is the people who were committing to making those purchasing decisions became emotionally invested in that decision as they were making that decision. So did they love them? Did they hate them? Well, unquestionably, they were committed to that relationship. They felt emotionally connected to that relationship.
Explainiacs.
What else do we have to do as businesses to fan the flames just a little bit more? Practically, do you have to start opening communication a lot more clearly?
The lines of communication is a really good question. And what goes wrong in any model of communication is that actually there can be noise.
Yeah.
So you ask the question, should we be opening up our lines of conversation with our customers more? Should we be getting more input from them? Yes and no.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
You would say no, because actually I would thought it would just be a flat yes.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. In the world of social media, we became part of this era of authenticity. The TEDx talk that I did in 2016 talked about the era of authenticity. And no one's used this phrase. And I'm like, well, you're like, duh, now people can see through things. Now, you could always use social media to see through things. So yes, social media encourages brands to be able to communicate with them. And those that do it very well are building loyal followings. And those who do it true to their ethos are actually having fun with their brands and their audiences. They're engaging them far better. The problem is if the organization isn't joined up, the messages they're getting from their customers are not joined up.
Lessons to learn.
So there's so much going on there, isn't there, Gina? It sounds as though, first of all, you have to start at the end to think about the why and think about the outcome before you go anywhere near starting to help your customers to fall in love with you. But also, what's really important is that ulterior motive thing. You can't go in there selling hard. And I think we're starting to learn that. The last few years, I think companies have started to do that. They're trying to humanize, they're trying to be socially responsible, they're trying to be the people that you want to associate with.
Simon Sinek talks about this in his illustration of the philosophy Start With Why. And he talks about it that most people focus on what they do, and then they might focus on how they do it, but right at the center of all of that is actually the why. And this has a direct connection with the love and affection that your customers can, will, and should show your brand if they know why you do what you do.
It's also about delivery, isn't it? It's about the type of delivery, the tone of voice, the way you're speaking, not only how often and what you're speaking about.
Very much so. You and I have both lived in a media and communications world where sharing a message is part and parcel of what we do almost all day, every day. The rest of the world doesn't think about communication to the same extent that we do. They just assume that they open their mouths and the word comes out and people hear what they have to say. Yeah. We know from the same communication model that what you and I try to say is not the same information that someone else is going to hear, because noise isn't just external noise, the clacking of the sound in my headphones. It's also the internal noise that goes on between people's ears and their brain, or worse, between someone's mouth and your intention, what's in your heart. And so the real art and science of brand communication that's going to win the love and respect of your prospective customers and keep your customers loyal to you is not just about authenticity or about trust. It's coming back to what you just said about who is saying the message, how are people hearing that message, and then more importantly, whether they believe that message or not, and whether they're prepared to take that and act on that because of the source that it's come from.
It's very simple in principle. Just take a step that way across the threshold of your business and become the customer again and just think, hey, what would I want? It's as simple as that.
It's like the journey. You know, they talk about it in marketing as a buyer's journey, but what we forget is it's actually a human journey. It's a human evolution. It's like falling in love with a brand from beginning to end. You get to know them. You get to discover what they do. You get to like what they do. If they do it right, you might even get to love what they do.
It is time to go. It was so lovely having you on today. I've really enjoyed it. Time to hear from you. Lots of you have been in touch already with names of experts who you'd love to hear from next time. Thanks very much for those so far. We are in touch if you've written one to us. But if you haven't, and you do have an Explainiac in your life, somebody who you think could explain and demystify a complicated subject that we'd all love to understand, let me know. Very simple. Just go to explainiacs.com and drop us a line there. And as always, if it's important, fascinating, or fun, we're here to explain it. Now, this chat is part one of a communications double bill. If you've still got a few minutes left before you have to drag yourself back to your desk, dog walk, dinner, or bedtime, have a listen to Explainiacs 3, just over 10 minutes long, a quick conversation between two creative types in a time of coronavirus. Well, speak in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.